on the Campfire. On the road. Don't worry, I'm following the law. I have a hands-free device. uh, this is your podcast about ghosts, cryptids, conspiracy theories, anything you would want to tell around a campfire. With me, one of your hosts, Stephen the Indian, and Will the Cowboy. We're a cowboy and Indian that talks about the creepy, the ghoulish, the mysterious, the conspiratorial. So, if you like that kind of content, give us a follow, listen to our episodes. You can find us on X, Instagram, and TikTok at Beyond Campfire or at Beyond Campfire Podcast. Be sure to connect with us there. And with all that to say, Mr. Will, what you got for us today?
Yes, sir. Today we've got a conspiracy theory that has pissed off English teachers for as long as people can remember. Because upon doing my research for this, there's a lot of English teachers out there who are mad and saying people are crazy for thinking this. But upon my investigation, um, the English teachers are wrong. They shouldn't be mad because today we'll be discussing how William Shakespeare might not have written his poems and plays.
Oh boy.
Yes, so that's right. Today we're going to be diving into a conspiracy theory that a lot of people have kind of you know, a lot of people have been kind of questioning Shakespeare. I'm going to go a little bit into who he was and the conspiracy theory, but there's two conspiracy theories that branch off from this idea. You either have conspiracy theory one, which is that Shakespeare was never a real person to begin with. That one I don't lean a little bit too much into today. Because I don't think there's enough evidence for that conspiracy theory to be plausible. And the second one is that William Shakespeare might not have even written his plays to begin with, that he might have just been a stand-in guy for somebody else to write the plays. So, Stephen, what do you know about Shakespeare?
He lived several hundred years ago. He wrote a bunch of plays and poems, and a bunch of high school teachers made me read a good bit of his stuff.
Yes, I also had to as well. I remember, I think ninth grade, maybe it was ninth grade. I think in ninth grade we read like Romeo and Juliet. I remember in 10th grade reading Macbeth. So, had a little bit of stuff in there. But yeah, William Shakespeare. He was born in 1864. We don't know the exact, or not 1864, 1564. My bad. He was born in 1564. We don't know the exact date he was born, but we do know, according to church documents, that he was baptized around April 26th. So we can take a guess that he was born sometime around then, because Catholics are dunking babies, man. Like cops dunk donuts and coffee. Anyways, he was born in Stratford, huh?
That is a fantastic way to put that.
Thank you. He was born in Stratford, England, and he is a famous English playwright and poet. According to record, he has written more than 37 plays and 150 poems, although some may have been lost or he may have had help writing some. So he's attributed to having 37 plays and 150 poems, but again, we've lost them, so it could be more than 150 poems and it could be more than 37 playwrights. But here's the problem with Shakespeare. We don't know a whole lot about his early years. Like, there's not a lot of history on his early years. But according to Nat Geo Kids, this is from Fun Facts About Shakespeare, they say that he had a good upbringing and he liked playing outdoors. Okay, great. That's all we know.
Wow, very informative there, Nat Geo Kids.
Yeah. So when he was 18 years old, he married Anne Hathaway in 1582, November 27th.
And all the other roles she's done.
I know, right? Do you want to take a guess how old Anne Hathaway was when they got married?
Oh, no.
What'd you say?
I said, is she a mom?
What?
Can you not hear me?
You were cutting out for a second there.
Can you not hear me?
I can hear you now.
Oh. Yeah, I was about to say I could hear myself the entire time, but if the podcast cannot hear me, that's a problem. I was saying, oh no, is she a minor?
No. Shakespeare was
Okay,
18 when they
good.
got married. Anne Hathaway was a cougar at the age of 26.
Whoa. Okay. Okay.
Yeah,
See,
Anne
I got
Hathaway over here.
because we did an episode on Edgar Allan Poe, who I like, but I found out some things about him that made me like, bro, what? So anyway.
Yeah. So 1582, they got married. And here's the crazy thing about their marriage is Anne Hathaway was getting some money from her dad because he was very rich and Shakespeare having to marry her. And what's also really strange is that 6 months into their marriage, she gave birth to their first child, Suzanne. So there's a possibility that Susanna, caused them to have a shotgun wedding. Fun
Oh,
fact about Shakespeare. He had a shotgun wedding, right? He was 18 years old, banging a 26-year-old and getting her pregnant.
yeah. Well, you gotta the consequences of your own actions.
Yeah. And then they also had twins, Judith and Hamnet. What a name, Hamnet. It's
All right.
Hamnet. Like, freaky name.
You
Weird
guys
names, man.
play that's very similar to that name.
Hamlet, Hamnet.
I know, right?
We'll find out. So Shakespeare disappeared from records in 1585. So for a while, we didn't know much about his childhood. He was on the records, had these children with Anne Hathaway, but in 1585 he disappeared from records. We had no recollection of him until he appeared in 1592 as a playwright and actor. So for 7 years, Shakespeare disappeared from records.
Huh.
Don't know why. We just don't know.
What was going on? Years.
Yeah. Furthermore,
no.
So while he was a playwright and actor, he was a part of Lord Chamberlain's Men, which is a theater group, right? Nowadays, me and Steven would pick on these people and call them gay theater kids. One play they did was called Theater. We really call it Theater.
Right.
There was apparently an argument where they got into an argument with a landlord, and they said, "You know what? Screw you, dude. We're going to take our theater and play, and we're going to go across the river." And that was how they got the Globe Theater.
Oh, I went there when I went to
Oh, you did?
London last year, yeah.
Yeah, so it used to be across the river, and then they got mad and moved it across. They said, we're going to pick up our house, and we're going to leave.
Look at that. Interesting.
So while doing all this and doing these plays and acting and all this, he became very wealthy and had two homes. He had one in Stratford and one in London, which they were pretty nice homes. And he was so famous during these plays that actually Queen Elizabeth I would visit his plays, and so would James IV of Scotland, later known as King James I. My wife helped me, like she writes my notes, I speak, and she was pretty confused when I said James IV of Scotland, also known as James I, and she's like, what? And I'm like, yeah, he's James IV of Scotland. Then he became King of England, and then he became James I.
I see. Not confusing at all.
Yeah. And so the Globe Theater burned down, the original one did, because they were using a cannon in the play, and a cannon, fire, wood, not good. Theater burned down. Shakespeare said, that's good enough for me. I'm retiring.
Some people's careers do end in a big burning ball of fire. And, anyway. Usually it's metaphorical, but sometimes it is literal. So.
Yep. Good old Willie, he died in 1616 at the age of 52 after becoming sick.
Pretty young.
Yeah. Well, he was sick, so he got sick and died.
Yeah, that'll do it.
And of course, upon his death, in the words of my wife in her notes, dude was loaded. He had a lot of money, although most of his money he kind of did through property investments. So he's kind of wise about his money, doing it through investments and property.
Yeah, fair enough. Now, as we continue, was this one where this was going to be a longer episode, or was I just want to make sure I'm not?
Oh, it's going to be kind of short.
Okay, I was just
I'm
making.
thinking probably like I maybe have another 15 minutes, 15, 20 minutes.
Sure, yeah.
Just kind of going into it. So that's the history of Shakespeare. Um, any thoughts, comments, or questions before I go further into the conspiracy theory of Shakespeare being a fraud?
Let's hear the conspiracy theory, man. I'm ready for it. Let's do it.
All right. So lots of cool fun facts about Shakespeare. We know who he is. You know, if you are not American and you did not sit through English class having to learn about this guy, there you go. So I'm going to take you guys on the trip that led me down this rabbit hole, because when I originally wrote the episodes out, I scoured the internet for hours just looking at ghost stories, cryptids, mysteries, whatever. And I saw this theory about Shakespeare not being real. Like, he was never a real person. And I was like, okay. I was like, let me look into this. I'm like, I might not be able to make an episode out of this, but I went down a rabbit hole. Okay. And this is the cool thing, guys, is and this is, we're anti AI here on Beyond the Campfire. If you use AI, you don't find stuff like this. Okay. So upon my research about this, I had seen where there were some famous people that had said some things about Shakespeare being fake. So it led me down a rabbit hole to where I looked into famous quotes by people that had to say things about Shakespeare being fake. And then there was something that piqued my interest. So I'm going to run through these quotes real quick because we got some famous people on here. All right. Do you know Charlie Chaplin?
Oh, yeah.
The good Hitler. He is quoted as saying, in the work of the greatest geniuses, humble beginnings will reveal themselves somewhere, but one cannot trace the slightest sign of them in Shakespeare. Whoever wrote Shakespeare had an aristocratic attitude. So kind of like, you can't find it. Shakespeare's this kind of guy and you don't see it in the works.
So he doesn't believe Shakespeare existed.
Nope. Do you know the name Samuel Clemens?
That sounds like maybe not a founding father, but someone from that period, maybe?
That's the name of Mark Twain.
Ah, there we go. Gotcha.
Yep. Mark Twain is stated as saying, "We are the reasoning race, and when we find a vague file of chipmunk tracks stringing through the dust of Stratford Village, we know by our reasoning powers that Hercules has been along there. I feel that our fetish is safe for 3 centuries yet."
Oh, wow. That is quite the statement from him. So
it's going to get better.
Oh, boy. Okay.
Do you know Sigmund Freud?
Yes.
He is quoted as saying, "I no longer believe that the actor from Stratford was the author of the works that have been ascribed to him. Since reading Shakespeare, identified by J. Thomas Looney, I am almost convinced that the assumed name conceals the personality of Edward De Vere, Earl of Oxford. The man of Stratford seems to have nothing at all to justify his claim, whereas Oxford has almost everything."
When Sigmund Freud was not crushing on his mom, that was, he has some good points. So, anyway,
well,
if any of you know Sigmund Freud, that's a joke about him. But yeah.
Steven's got the jokes today, man. I'm going to keep reading some more famous quotes, but I just want you to remember this name is going to pop up a lot. Edward De Vere, Earl of Oxford. Okay. I want you guys to buckle in and remember that name. Helen Keller is stated as saying, "Research led me to the conclusion that Shakespeare of Stratford is not to be even thought of as a possible author of the most wonderful plays of the world. The question now remains, who was William Shakespeare?"
Not the blind and deaf woman. Man.
You ready? We got a lot more, man.
Let's hear him.
Our boy Malcolm X.
Whoa, okay. All right, let's hear him.
He is quoted as saying, from 1604 to 1611, King James got poets to translate to write the Bible. Well, if Shakespeare existed, he was then the top poet around, but Shakespeare is nowhere reported connected with the Bible. If he existed, why didn't King James use him?
Okay, that's a good point.
Do you know Anne Rice?
No. Who is that?
I don't. She's another famous person. She's quoted as saying, "I'm falling in love with this idea that the real Shakespeare was Edmund de Vere, the Earl of Oxford. It is astonishing what the Edward de Vere camp has turned up in the way of research to explain all kinds of mysteries of the plays and the life of the so-called Shakespeare. Very, very interesting stuff." Okay.
Interesting indeed.
Now, a couple of these quotes I have kind of skipped because I don't really know who these people are. I'm trying to pick out the famous ones. And the last quote is from the best comedian ever. We love him. You can't hate the guy because he's so great. Robin Williams.
Oh, wow. Okay, all right.
You think about William Shakespeare, you think a man basically with a second grade education wrote some of the greatest poetry of all times? I think maybe not. So, in the quote from Anne Rice, and as well from Sigmund Freud, I'm going to read another quote before I go into kind of who really could have been Shakespeare based off my research. And that is a quote from Sir Derek Jacobi. I don't know if that name's familiar. Do you know Sir Derek?
I don't know who that is.
Sir Derek Jacobi was an English actor. He like was in Hamlet and Gladiator and Henry V. So he's a really famous actor, English actor. He is quoted as saying, "Where did this Shakespeare come from? Where did all that knowledge and eloquence and truth come from? I believe Edward De Vere and not William Shakespeare of Stratford wrote Richard II, and in fact, all the plays attributed to the man from Stratford." 3 of the quotes I've read to you have this guy's name, which, as I said, is Edward De Vere of Oxford. Okay. So I said we're throwing away the conspiracy theory that, Shakespeare was not a real person. Shakespeare was definitely a real person. Okay. We don't know a lot about him, but there's a lot of evidence to suggest that he is a real person. But based off what I've discovered and researched, I'm going to prove to you Shakespeare did not write his plays, that he's a fraud.
Oh boy, let's get into it. Let us get into it.
Okay. So, as I said, I found a website, and it's Shakespeare Oxford Fellowship. And they have 18 reasons why Edward De Vere Oxford was Shakespeare. I'm going to go through a couple of them because, there are some pretty good ones out there. So a lot of people think that, he was the hidden writer of all of these. He was known during his lifetime as a secret writer, but he did not like to publish his work under his name. In 1589, the anonymous author of The Art of English Poesy stated, "I know very many notable gentlemen in the court that have written commendably and suppressed it, or else suffered it to be published without their own names to it, as if it were a discredit for a gentleman to seem learned and to show himself amorous of any good art." This book is referred to as courtly makers, noblemen, who have written excellently well, as it would appear if their doings could be found out and made public with the rest, of which number is the first that noble gentleman, Edward, Earl of Oxford. So this guy kind of comes on to the stage. Now, Francis Mears, who is another guy from 1598, stated that he believed that Oxford was one of the best writers of comedy. But here's the problem. There's no comedies attributed to this man.
Huh.
So how can he be the best comedy writer?
Yeah, that's a good point. Okay.
So there's a theory that kind of goes in that what Edward De Vere was doing was he was like, William Shakespeare was actually an actor and playwright, or he was an actor, but either one possibility is that Shakespeare stepped up for this man to say, "I will be the face of your plays," or he was using a pseudonym that was very close to William Shakespeare that Shakespeare was kind of able to pick up a little bit. And that Shakespeare was actually a pseudonym. So in 1578, a Latin oration by Gabriel Harvey, he said of Oxford, "Vultus tili vibrat," which translates to "thy continuance, thy countenance shakes spears."
That sounds Latin.
Yes, it is Latin and is translated, like I said, to "thy countess shakes spears."
Oh, Shakespeare.
Now, this could have been a later inspiration for the use of Shakespeare as a pen name. As apparently the Elizabethan era around Shakespeare's time is known as the Golden Age of pseudonyms. So Archer Taylor and Frederick J. Mosher have a book on pseudonym writings. And they stated, in the 16th and 17th centuries, the golden age of pseudonyms, almost every writer used a pseudonym at the time or other during his career. So we have quotes from people that are saying, like, there's a possibility that Oxford was Shakespeare and was using this as a pseudonym, and that William Shakespeare, the guy we know about, isn't actually the guy writing the plays. This is why some people kind of lean a little bit more into the camp of Shakespeare never existed. However, I think the Earl of Oxford was the true writer. How it all happened, I'll explain that in just a second. But some other things too. Oxford was known as a patron of the arts. He loved theater and poetry. He commissioned various books and translations. He had apparently 28 books dedicated to him during his lifetime. He sponsored 2 theater tropes, a men's trope and a boys' trope. And apparently leased the Blackfriars Theater in 1580s for his boys' trope.
Alrighty then.
Yes. So a little bit more. Let's see. So there's a long narrative poem called Venus and Adonis. This was the first work published under Shakespeare. And apparently he described Adonis as wearing a bonnet. Apparently this mirrors one of the many paintings of Venus and Adonis by the Venetian artist Titan. However, the only one that shows Adonis wearing a bonnet. Okay. However, this could only be seen at the Titian's studio in Venice, basically where Oxford spent most of his life. So we have a poem being written about these two characters, and it's described as one of them wearing a bonnet. These 2 characters are featured in a painting by this guy who painted it in Venice. Now, who was in Venice a lot, apparently? Earl of Oxford. Mr. Edward. So he was in Venice a lot, and he could have definitely seen this painting and then wrote this poem. But Shakespeare never really went to Oxford, or never went to Venice. So there's a question there. So apparently, Ovid's Metamorphosis, it's recognized as one of Shakespeare's most influential sources that he uses, second only to the Bible. And it was translated into English by Arthur Golding, who is Oxford's uncle. And apparently Oxford was living in the same house as him at the time of the translation.
A lot of interesting details starting to connect.
Here's another thing. So, the famous soliloquy in Hamlet, to be or not to be, that is the question.
Oh, yeah.
It echoes Girolamo Cardano's Conforte, which it was written in 1542 and is stated as saying, "What should we account of death to be resembled to anything better than a sleep? We are assured not only to sleep, but also to die." Which, pretty close to be or not to be. Apparently Oxford, Edward, commissioned an English translation of this by Thomas Bedingfield in 1573, for which Oxford wrote the preface. So this famous quote, which is used in Hamlet, is once again connected to Edward.
There you go. So, I'll let you finish your whole spiel because I'm starting to gain an opinion.
Yes. So here's the other thing too. Another reason why Edward's the most likely to be for this is because many of Shakespeare's stories line up with his life. And so when I'm going through these facts real quick, so far, like I said, we've got, he didn't allow for his works to be published under his name. He was a secret writer. So Edward very much could have secretly written these and let Shakespeare take the credit. And of course, we got the golden age of pseudonyms. So it's very plausible. But like I said, some of these stories line up a lot with Edward's life and not Shakespeare. So it's kind of like, where did Shakespeare get these ideas when they line up so very easily with, Oxford? For example, if you know the story of Hamlet, Hamlet got captured by pirates on his way to England, and he was left naked on the shore of Denmark. Okay. Oxford, Edward, was returned to England from the continent when he was captured by pirates who left him naked on the shore of England.
No way. That's insane.
Just like Hamlet.
Yeah. Okay, that is a crazy coincidence. What the heck?
Apparently, King Lear, which plays King Lear from? Let me double check that real quick.
I think it's called King Lear, isn't it?
Yeah, King Lear, which is a play by Shakespeare, of course. In King Lear, he had 3 daughters, just like Oxford did.
Okay.
And just as Lear divided his kingdom among his daughters while he still lived, Oxford placed his family lands in trust for the benefit of his daughters while he lived. So he did the exact same thing.
Oh, I was gonna say, yeah, that's what
as
happened.
King Lear.
Yeah.
Okay.
Fascinating. Okay.
This is where it's going to get really, 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 really crazy again.
Oh boy.
In The Merchant of Venice, okay, Antonio, the merchant, borrows 3,000 ducats from Shylock, the moneylender, right, to help finance Bassanio's wedding or wooing of Portia. Another Shakespeare play. And it lines right up with Oxford's real life, because Oxford borrowed 3,000 pounds from a moneylender named Michael Locke to finance a voyage seeking a northwest passage to India. To sorry about that. We're trying to get my son to bed, so he kind of came up and wanted to start talking to me. Anyways, so Merchant of Venice, Antonio borrows 3,000 ducats from Shylock to kind of help finance Bassanio's wooing of Portia. In real life, Oxford, he borrowed 3,000 pounds from a moneylender named Michael Locke to seek a northwest passage to India. And the character Shylock greatly resembles Gaspar Ribeiro, a Venetian Jew who was successfully sued for making a usurious 3,000 ducat loan. Ribeiro lived in the same parish in Venice where Oxford attended church.
Okay.
The facts keep getting factor.
Alrighty.
And in Shakespeare's Taming of the Shrew, there's a rich man named Baptista Manola. He has 2 daughters that were eligible for marriage, Kate and Bianca. Meanwhile, in Italy, Oxford, the real Shakespeare possibly, borrowed money from a man named Baptista Negrone, and also from a man named Pasquale Spinola, whose names must have inspired Manola's name. So, of course, he didn't marry off his daughters, but he borrowed money from 2 dudes whose names together make up the guy from Shakespeare's play.
Okay, there are just like a lot of weird facts that do seem to connect together, which makes me think maybe this guy is actually the real Shakespeare all along.
Now, I've got like maybe 3 more pieces of evidence I can go through. Because there's like
rapid fire them and then we'll
yeah. So in The Winter's Tale, there's the statue of the Queen. She's described as a piece many years in doing and now nearly performed by that rare Italian master, Giulio Romano. Romano is the only artist mentioned by name in Shakespeare's work. Okay. Many critics, they scoffed at Shakespeare's ignorance and thinking that Romano was a sculptor when he was actually a painter. So, but in Shakespeare's time, right, he's talking about this guy in one of his stories in The Winter's Tale, and he puts down the only person he's ever mentioned by name, and he calls him a sculptor. And everyone's like, dude, you're so stupid. You're stupid. He's a painter. What do you think? He's a painter. He's not sculpting nothing. Here's where it gets crazy. Shakespeare was actually right, and the critics were wrong. Romano was a sculptor and a painter as well. This can be witnessed by a sculpture on the tomb of Baldassare Castiglione in Mantua. Castiglione, by the way, was one of Oxford's heroes. And he commissioned the translation of Castiglione's book of the Courtier into Latin so that noblemen all over Europe could benefit from it. Mantua is along the route Oxford would known to have traveled, and he likely would have wanted to pay his respects to one of his spiritual mentors. So you've got this play or this story, and everybody's like, you're stupid for naming this guy out loud because he's just a painter. And Shakespeare's like, no, 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 he is a sculptor. And he's the guy who sculpted the tomb for Edward of Oxford's hero. And it's just coincidence. Speaking about Romano, he is also in Mantua. Also in Mantua are Romano's paintings of the Trojan War on the walls and the ceiling of the Sala di Trua, or the Room of Troy, in the Palazzo Ducale, or the Ducal Palace. In The Rape of Lucrece, one of Shakespeare's poem, the heroine, after she was raped, goes into a room with paintings on the wall depicting the Trojan War. The description of those paintings, which encompass over 200 lines, look almost exactly like that room owned by Romano, which Oxford would have seen.
Okay.
Now, going back to the stories and everything, because after this, I got like one last good piece of evidence, and then we can tell what we think.
Beat it up. All right.
All right. So, Hamlet and Beowulf. Okay.
I
read Hamlet. You've read Hamlet. I've read Beowulf.
Yep.
In Hamlet, as he's dying, spoiler alert, he dies.
Oh, man.
His friend Horatio speaks to him as he's dying, and he says, Horatio, I am dead. Thou livest. Report me and my cause aright to the unsatisfied. O good Horatio, what a wounded name. Things standing thus unknown shall live behind me. If thou didst ever hold me in thy heart, absent thee from felicity a while, and in this harsh world draw thy breath in pain to tell my story.
Okay.
This part of the story, people believe, may have been inspired by the ending of the Old English epic poem Beowulf. This is the first known work of literature in the English language. Beowulf is dying from his wounds inflicted on him during a battle with a dragon. He looks at his fellow warrior, Wiglaf, and basically tells him to create a burial mound in his memory, saying, the battle famed bid ye to build them a grave hill. As a memory mark to the men I have governed, aloft it shall tower, that earls of the ocean hereafter may call it Beowulf's barrow. So they're using their dying breath to basically tell their friends, remember me. I want to be remembered. So in Oxford's time, Beowulf was not accessible to the public.
Right.
Because there was only one copy ever in existence. And it was the manuscript.
Interesting.
And that copy was owned by Lawrence Noel.
Okay.
Do you want to take a guess who Lawrence Noel was?
Was he that guy you keep talking about?
No, he was Edward of Oxford's tutor.
Oh, I see.
So the dying breath of Hamlet matches Beowulf. Beowulf was not accessible to the public at this time, and there was only one copy, and it was the hands of Edward De Vere of Oxford's tutor. Coincidence? I think not.
All right. Does that take care of all the evidence now?
The last evidence we have is that Shakespeare's poems. He had sonnets that were first published in 1609. However, there are indications on the dedication page that the author was no longer living at that time of the poems. First, the dedication is signed by the publisher, Thomas Thorpe, not by the author, suggesting the author was not alive to write this dedication. More significantly, the dedication refers to the author as ever living. This is a phrase metaphorically to refer to a person who is no longer alive. But why would Shakespeare write this if he was still alive in 1609?
Right.
Because if he didn't write those poems, and it was Oxford was no longer living in 1609. While, of course, Shakespeare, who is credited for writing the works of Shakespeare, would still be alive for at least another 7 years. Stratfordian scholars have never been able to explain why the phrase ever living would have been applied to a living person. So, to run you back through the evidence of Shakespeare and why it was definitely Edward De Vere of Oxford, a lot of the stories line up with Edward's life. A lot of the things that were in these plays could only truly be accessible by someone like Edward. And on top of that, we've got the poems. And if you look at Shakespeare's poems, why write on there the dedication and basically hint at it that the author's dead when Shakespeare was alive in 1609 and wouldn't be dead for another 7 years? But but Edward De Vere of Oxford was dead at that time. So the question comes to you, Stephen. Do you think Edward De Vere of Oxford is the true Shakespeare?
I don't know if it was Edward De Vere, although that was a lot of evidence, so maybe you're right. I do think now you've convinced me that William Shakespeare probably wasn't a real person. Now, my thing is, somebody wrote those plays, right? So there is a William Shakespeare out there. But I think you have successfully convinced me that a man named William Shakespeare, not around.
So you don't think it could have been Edward that wrote these plays?
I think, well, I'm not saying it's definitively him. I think I am at the point where I'm definitively, there is no Shakespeare. At least not in like the way they talk about him. So, okay, there you go. So that's my thoughts. Edward De Vere, I mean, he's probably the leading candidate. I don't know.
I definitely think so.
I don't know if there's other candidates out there. Obviously, we're focusing on Edward De Vere.
Yeah. One thing I will make note about, like, and this is kind of the reason why also I lean a little bit into it, is that when you hear about Edward De Vere of Oxford, he wasn't just some regular Joe Schmo. He was very educated. He was a high noble. So like he had the money, he had the education and the ability to access the knowledge needed to write these plays. Whereas Shakespeare probably didn't. We don't know anything about his early childhood. A lot of people think he probably had a very poor education. And that's why I'm glad I'm leaning you that way. I definitely think Edward De Vere could have definitely been behind it. A lot of the stories from Shakespeare line up a little too close with Edward De Vere of Oxford, like his real life. And it's like, if these two never met, which I don't think they did, how did Shakespeare get the inspiration for these stories? And how is it so coincidentally they line up? If it was like one story, sure, but to have multiple line up.
Yeah. I got to run.
Yeah.
You can close out however you want to, but
yeah.
Well, there we go, guys. For De Vere. You've heard my thoughts. We'll give his.
Yeah. So thank you guys again for watching, and I hope we convinced you guys that Shakespeare was very much possibly a fraud. If you're new here, like we said, make sure you guys like, comment, subscribe. Follow us on Twitter and Instagram at Beyond Campfire. And yeah, was the greatest writer in history actually Shakespeare? Or was he the greatest fraud in history?